Good morning. It's a beautiful Monday morning here. Ish. I mean, it's Monday. We are on chapter 74 of A Child's History of the World. The title of which is A Prince Who Ran Away. You ready, Lily?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do this. If you put a P in front of Russia, it makes Prussia. This was the name of a little country in Europe that was later a part of Germany. Russia was big, and Peter made it great. Remember last time we talked about Peter the Great and then Catherine the Great?
Mm-hmm.
Prussia was small, but another king made it also great. This king's name was Frederick. He too lived in the 18th century, but a little later than Peter, and he too was called the Great. So Frederick the Great.
And Peter the Great.
Indeed. Frederick's father, who was the second king of Prussia, had a hobby for collecting giants, as you might collect postage stamps. Whenever he heard of a very tall man, no matter in what country and no matter what the cost to get him, he bought or hired him. This collection of giants he made into a remarkable company of soldiers, which was his special pride. He was a very cranky, cross, and bad-tempered old king. He treated his children terribly, especially his son Frederick, whom he called Fritz. Fritz had curls and liked music and poetry and fancy clothes. His father didn't like this, for he wanted a son who would be a soldier and a fighter. His father, when angry, used to throw dishes at him, lock him up for days at a time, and feed him on bread and water and whip him with a cane. Finally, Fritz could stand it no longer, and he ran away. He was caught and brought back. His father was so angry with his son for disobeying him and acting as he had done that he was actually going to have him killed. Yes, put to death, his own son.
Mm-hmm.
But at the last minute was persuaded not to do so. But here's a strange thing. When Fritz grew up to be Frederick, he turned out to be just what his father wanted him to be, a great soldier and a fighter. He still loved poetry and even tried to write poems himself, and he was very fond of music, and he played the flute very well indeed. Pretty. But Frederick wanted, above everything else, to make his country important in Europe. For before his time, it was of little account, and no one paid much attention to it. Now the neighboring country to Prussia was Austria. Austria was ruled over by a woman named Maria Theresa. That should sound familiar. We've talked about her. Maria Theresa had become ruler of Austria at the same time that Frederick had become ruler of Prussia. Some people said that a woman should not rule a country, and they wanted to use this as an excuse to start a war.
To kill her?
No, to start a war. Frederick's father had promised to let Maria Theresa alone. He had promised not to fight just because she was a woman. But when Frederick became king, he wanted to add a part of Austria to his own country. So he simply helped himself to a piece of Maria Theresa's country that he wanted. He didn't care if she was a woman or what his father had promised. Of course, this started a war. Before long, almost every country in Europe was fighting either with Frederick or against itself. But Frederick not only succeeded in getting what he was after,
Mom,
he succeeded in holding on to it.
I just know you like to play with Play-Doh.
I know. Mommy does like Play-Doh.
So I was giving you some while you read because I thought it would make sense.
Okay. Just be quiet and listen, though. Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Maria Theresa, however, would not give up. She wanted to get back what had been wrongfully taken from her.
Wait, Mommy, is it like Mona Lisa?
No, it's Maria Theresa. the leader of, or the queen of Austria. Okay, Maria Theresa, however, would not give up. She wanted to get back what had wrongly been taken from her. She began quietly and secretly to get ready for another war against Frederick. Quietly and secretly, she got other countries to promise to help her. But Frederick heard of what she was doing, and suddenly he attacked her again. Rude.
Oh, the purple in there.
And for 7 long years, this next war went on. This was called if it went on for 7 years, what's it going to be called? The 7 Years' War. Exactly. Frederick kept on fighting until he had beaten Austria for good, and until he had gained his purpose, which was to make his little country of Prussia the most powerful country in Europe. He still held on to the part of Austria that he had at first taken away. Maria Theresa was a great queen, and she would have won against Frederick had he been an ordinary king. But she had too strong a ruler against her. Frederick was one of the world's smartest generals and too much for her. The 7 Years' War, strange to say, was fought out not only in Europe, but in far-off America also. Okay, girls, less singing, more listening.
Mom, look.
Yes, baby, I see. England had taken Frederick's side. France and other countries had taken sides against him. The English settlers in America, who were on Frederick's side, fought the French settlers who were against him. When Frederick won in Europe, the English in America also won against the French in America. I'm telling you all this today because that is why we in America speak English instead of French.
Because we don't like French.
No, it's not that silly. It's because they won the war. There's nothing wrong with France. Although French is actually a much easier language to learn. Sorry, kids.
Not for me.
Well, it's because you were never taught French, you cheeseball.
And because
If Frederick had lost in Europe and the English had lost in America, the French would have won. And we here in America would probably now speak French instead of English. Frederick, like some other kings we have heard of before, thought nothing of lying or cheating or stealing if he had to in order to get the better of other countries. Fair means or foul means made no difference to him. But his own people he treated as if they were his children and did everything he could for them. Like a lioness with her cubs, he fought for his family, even with the world against him. There was a mill close to Frederick's palace that belonged to a poor miller. As it was not a pretty thing to be so near, the king wanted to buy it in order to tear it down and get rid of it, but the miller would not sell. Although Frederick the Great offered a large sum of money, the miller refused. A great many kings would simply have taken the mill and perhaps put the miller in jail, please scoot over, or put him to death. Frederick did neither, for he thought his lowly subjects had his rights and that if he didn't want to sell, he shouldn't be made to. He left the miller undisturbed, and the mill stands today as it did then, close to the palace.
Yay.
Though Frederick was German, strange to say, he hated the German language. He thought it the language of the uneducated. He himself spoke French and wrote in French, and only spoke German when he had to talk to his servants or to those who did not understand France. Well, everybody, thankfully he won, so we speak English. But again, French, pretty easy language to learn comparatively. Hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Looking at our schedule, it looks like that's pretty much the last one for our week. So we will be seeing you in a bit. Ta-ta for now.